This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here. We have one great show for you today. Chairman Jim Jordan, he's chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Kevin Hassett, director of the Economic Council, he feels that our country is going in the right direction. Bonnie Brady, on those windmills. Congressman Bill Hacienda from the state of Michigan. Lynn Shaw, about taking care of our kids. Dr. Peter Michalos, live long and prosper. General Blaine Holt. And let's start off with Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
With us today is the United States Attorney for the Southern District. We have Jay Clayton with us. And Jay Clayton, there's so many things going on. Where do you want to start?
You know what, John? This morning, I want to start with some good news. And I've been in this job for over a year now and know that the people of New York are unified on a number of things. One of them is they want violent, gun-toting criminals off our streets. And together with the NYPD, working hand in hand with them and with our partners at the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, we just calculated some numbers. And we have over 225 gun-toting criminals who've shot at people in the last year are either detained pending trial or are serving time in federal prison. John, that's 225 people in New York that shouldn't be on our streets, who are not on our streets. And that's thanks to the partnership.
And the bad news is, Jay, that the fact is that if they went to local district attorneys or state or whatever, they'd be in the streets again. Isn't that one of the problems we have?
Unfortunately, John, that is a fair statement. Now, it's a combination of things. It's the laws at the state are not what they should be. I know that people in Albany, I won't say people in the city of New York, but people in Albany are pushing to improve some of those laws, particularly around bail and the like. But you're right, John. We have needed to bring federal powers to this situation. And I am proud to say that in partnership with the police and in partnership with others, we've done it. It's not perfect, but crime is way down. And crime is way down, particularly in the violent area, thanks to that partnership. And I think it's what the people of New York want.
I am praying and hoping that Governor Hochul has better control over the state attorney generals that, what are the 51 districts and 51 counties in New York?
And yes, and John, you're so right. I'm hoping that people see that with this focus, and we're not talking about petty crime or petty criminals. We're talking about career offenders, people who have multiple gun arrests, multiple violent crime arrests and convictions, and focusing on those, the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst should be off the streets. And I hope that our partners in the state and our partners in the local DAs are seeing that this makes a difference. And the people of New York should say, hey, it makes a difference. Get those career gun-toting violent criminals off the streets. No one wants them on the streets, John.
We've both spoken to the White House, and the priority is to get the major criminals off the streets first. And I think that 85-90% of the people believe that we're doing the right thing.
I would go 95, John. I mean, I would. Who takes the other side of that? Who says that a person who's multiple gun arrests, multiple gun convictions, shooting somebody, who says, you know what? Let's let that person out on the streets. You know who says that? Someone who doesn't someone who doesn't live in a place where they're likely to get shot by that guy. That's who says it.
100%.
You know, let's be real about this. The people who are separated from the consequences of crime are the only ones who want those people on the streets.
We want a safe New York, New York City, New York State, and we want all politicians to be going in the right direction, that they want the same thing too. I don't understand some of the politicians that they don't want the boats carrying drugs to our cities. They don't want them shut down. I mean, I scratch my head. I don't understand that. And, you know, look, we want our kids to grow up in a great city, a great state, and a great country.
I could not agree more. And I know that our job is it's guns and drugs and sex trafficking. Stopping those three things is what every parent wants, because if you can remove those three things from our communities, from our most challenged communities, the kids have a much better chance.
And I talked to Frank Tarantino, who's in charge of drug enforcement in the Northeast here, and he says that ever since we shut down Venezuela, that things are much better in drugs. Have you seen that too?
We shut down Venezuela, and we're doing everything we can to shut down the Sinaloa cartel, which, you know, basically was controlling the Sinaloa state in Mexico. John, we cannot have Mexico as our deep economic partner and have parts of Mexico controlled by drug cartels who ship fentanyl and cocaine, or fentanyl disguised as cocaine, into our country. It's just not tenable. We can't have an economic partner like that.
We all agree, and like we've said before, I'm disappointed in China, because China could shut that down in 5 minutes if they wanted to.
John, China is not doing their job on that. They're not doing their job on precursor chemicals that are used to manufacture in these pill mills with oxy and meth and all the drugs that we know debilitate neighborhoods and communities. No one thinks that China is doing what they can do to help. In fact, I think they turned a blind eye, or even an encouraging eye, to it.
We talked about murderers and criminals on the streets. We talked about drugs. What's the next item that you most worry about in the Southern District?
Well, the next item is, you know, the sex trafficking that we're focusing on. But I want to bring also another positive point. We've got violent crime down. John, artificial intelligence and better data is going to help us root out fraud and waste in the public benefit system. The amount of money that is wasted in federal benefits or state benefits that are supported by the federal government in New York City and other communities is staggering. And I'm telling you that artificial intelligence is going to help us catch the criminals. And just like we're focusing on the most violent criminals, we're going to focus on the biggest cheats. And this is a warning to them. What used to take us a month to figure out, with AI and the right data, we can figure out in a day. And we're going to come after them.
Now, the other thing I've seen in the New York State budget was they just passed the budget, and what is it, Medicaid or Medicare, where the big problem is? It's up. Is it Medicaid?
Medicaid is the big problem, and it's the big.
It's
problem.
up to $125 billion in New York State. How can that be possible? $125 billion for 19 million people in New York State, and I think Florida, the whole state, is only like $33 billion.
It's about incentives, John. There is no incentive for anyone in the system to reduce that number. Everybody does better the bigger that number is. That's very unfortunate. It's a poor structure. What we're going to do, and what, this is right from President Trump to Vice President Vance, to the fraud section at Main Justice, we are going to focus on this, and where there is fraud, we are going to bring cases, and the data is going to help us. This needs to change. But there is no incentive for the state to do any better because the federal government reimburses it.
Well, I recommended to the people, the powers that be in Washington, that there should be an additional person in there to sign off before the check goes out.
I think, John, whatever we can do, I think you're right, and the American people should see this data. They should know how much waste there is in that system.
Anything else you want to say to the American people?
I want to say that New York is hosting some of the greatest events this summer. We've got the World Cup. We've got America 250. We've got other things. And that we at the Justice Department, at the Southern District, are working with Commissioner Tisch and the FBI, and we're going to do everything we can to keep the people of New York safe through all these events.
Jay Clayton, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, thank you for everything you do, and thank you for keeping New Yorkers safe, and God bless you and God bless America. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
The Cats Roundtable.
Well, with us today is Chairman Jim Jordan. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. On Thursday, we talked about sanctuary cities. How about fraud? The amount of fraud going on in various states. In Minnesota, in California. How can this happen in the United States of America?
Well, a couple things. One is when you got a government as big and that much money flowing from our government, I think there's the potential for people to try to abuse the system, and they've obviously done that. To the tune of billions of dollars we're talking about, and it's ridiculous. So one of the things I think we need to do from a legislative standpoint is have more checks and balances on the front end before the dollars ever go out the door. And then, of course, you also have to prosecute on the back end, and because the greatest deterrent is prosecuting people who actually are stealing taxpayer money. And God bless the vice president. He's heading up the effort for President Trump and looking into this fraud and dealing with it. And then, of course, Todd Blanche, the Attorney General, what they're doing at the Justice Department, I think, is very positive, too. They've got a person designated to deal with the fraud prevention and prosecute these people who are stealing taxpayer money. Colin McDonald is that individual. Great guy, great young lawyer who's you saw him at a press event last week where he was talking about all the folks that they are prosecuting up in Minnesota and others that they're now looking at doing, particularly, as you mentioned, in California. So that's how you have to do it. And because it was so blatant. Remember the case up in Minnesota, John? You had it was called Feeding Our Future. And this lady's now been indicted and prosecuted and sentenced to, I think, 41 years in prison. Her name is Amy Bach. She was running this operation, and it was set up back during COVID. The idea was to feed kids who weren't in school during COVID. It was to provide meals to kids. The only problem was there were no meals and no kids. They were simply just filling out forms and stuffing the money in their pocket. So there's got to be some checks on the front end where you actually, before the money ever goes out the door, you go see, are there really students here that you're feeding? Where are the meals you're preparing? Those kind of things have to happen. And there's now also, finally, I would say there's been a task force set up in the Oversight Committee, Chairman Comer's committee. There's been a task force set up as well in Congress to focus on this issue as well. So I do think it's getting the attention that it deserves, and hopefully we'll have real results that save Americans, save taxpayers' money.
Well, I think there has to be one last signature before money goes out, because right now the current system didn't work at all, and there's got to be some checks and balances. So the president or whoever has to add one additional signature. Now, also, there was some stuff going on with on the Supreme Court debates.
Well, we actually had a hearing in our committee on the Democrats' plan to pack the court.
It's silly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it sure is. But the Democrats, when they say pack the court, what they mean is they want to add 4 new justices, 4 liberal justices, And I remember I raised the point, why 4? Why not 1? Why not 2? Why not 3? Why not 5? Well, they want 4 because right now it's a 6-3 majority conservative court, and they know that 4 gives them a 7-6 majority liberal court, and they want to do that. Now, it's interesting. They don't want to start this until there's a Democrat president. Because I raised the issue, would you be comfortable with adding 4 new justices right now and letting President Trump select those 4 new justices? Of course, they're not comfortable with that because it's all about power for the left. And they're tired of a court that actually interprets the Constitution the way it's supposed to be, looks at the original intent of the folks who wrote the Constitution. They don't like that. They like this living, breathing approach where they can make the Constitution into whatever they want to at the time that fits their political advantage. So, so we had a hearing on that. I thought it was a good hearing where we were able to, I think, demonstrate that, just what the Democrats are trying to do.
Don't they, to change the Supreme Court, the amount of people in the Supreme Court, doesn't it take more than just a Senate or congressional action?
No, it can be a bill. It can be a bill. It can be done with just, versus a constitutional amendment, a law versus it can be just a law where it passes the House, passes the Senate, signed by the president. And they can change the number of people on the court because the Constitution doesn't mandate a certain number. Just obviously mandates that we have a separate and equal branch of government, the court, the judicial branch, but it doesn't mandate what the number is on the highest court. Yeah,
Chairman Jim Jordan of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for coming on.
You bet, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable.
What is going on around the world? We have General Blaine Holt with us. General, can you fill us in?
Yep. Good morning. What I'll tell you is we're getting very, very close to the end of this Iranian saga. The president is working a deal. It's just extremely complex for the ones that he's working with. We think that the leaders now that are emerging of Iran are Gandalboff, the Speaker of the Parliament, and Aragachi, the Foreign Minister. The trouble is, as they negotiate, they have to be very careful about what they say publicly, and a lot of times they say anti-U.S. things publicly, even after the president says we're getting close, because they have the other threat of the IRGC viewing them as potential traitors to Iran and then killing them. On the other side, you've got a potential revolution that's brewing in Iran, and these two leaders are going to have to make their peace with them. So what I see, John, is a Venezuela-style outcome where, like Delcy Rodriguez finally decided she was in love with the United States and President Trump. I think you're going to see these two do the same thing, but it's going to be the orchestration of that. I think we're going to see that this week.
Who are we negotiating with? Any idea?
Yeah, I think it's probably a member or two of the Iranian resistance that the foreign minister and Speaker of Parliament have kind of grouped themselves with. And the reason I know this is because as much venom as the foreign minister and the Speaker of Parliament have spewed at us, this last week they went to Doha and Qatar to do these talks, came out in the open. They were glad handing each other big smiles and laughing and slapping backs. We're very close to the end. I believe it's just an orchestration of how do we deal with what's left of the IRGC, who is broke but still is sitting on top of some weaponry.
What happened with the meeting between Putin and Xi? Do they want peace or do they want to stir the pot? What's going to happen with Ukraine? Your gut feeling.
Yeah, so it was a very important meeting between Putin and Xi because it happened hours after President Trump had been there. I believe that America, Russia, and China are coordinating on the Middle East, but they're also coordinating on the end of the war in Ukraine. You have it's the problem in both cases, John, is Europe and its leadership, which is doubling down on stupid. They won't help with NATO in the Middle East, and they want to continue this forever war in Ukraine, and Russia wants an end to it, yesterday, and now you're seeing them pick up the pace. They're starting to, unfortunately, attack Kiev as a way to maybe bring this thing to an end. But the problem in both cases is clearly Europe. It's not Russia or China.
And you were involved with NATO at one point in your career. You were involved with CENTCOM. I mean, I am very disappointed in NATO and the way they're acting. After all, we've saved their tail for many times before. Are you disappointed?
I'm very disappointed, but it is a global institution that's now showing its true colors. That its allegiances really are with the globalist financialist base out of the City of London banking consortium. And how do I know that? I know that because Lloyd's of London is the reason that you don't have 2,000 ships leaving the Straits of Hormuz. They have basically threatened companies that if you play ball with President Trump, take a U.S. cruiser as an escort, or if you take him up on United States insurance, then we won't insure you anywhere in the world. And so Scott Bessent is truly a general in this very global war with these financialists. He's shutting down their sources of money laundering. He's shutting down these nefarious flows. They don't like it. And it's everything from the Venezuela cartels all the way through the energy stockage control in the Straits of Malacca. This is where the action is. This is what's going on. And this is why you see behavior out of Europe like you can't use our bases. We don't support you. We have to rethink this relationship. So what does that do? That puts President Trump in this amazing position that if you want to keep NATO alive and well, here's a new price, and these are the things that the United States wants. And I think there is a deal in the early fall that NATO is going to have to strike to save itself.
Wow. And European community. I mean, open borders. I mean, is that feasible anymore? Don't the French and Germans realize what happened to them?
I think that's going away. I think ultimately what you're going to see, and you can look at the bond markets. They tell you everything in advance. the EU and Ursula von der Leyen, unelected bodies, they're about to take the big fall because they have essentially cashiered the pensions, the savings, the industrial base of Europe to have this war that President Trump is denying them. They want to go to war with the Russians. They must have forgotten that they're the number one nuclear power on the planet with Oreshkin hypersonic missiles. But they're doubling down on stupid, and I think what it's going to cost them is the Schengen zone and the EU as a body itself. I think that does go away.
General Blaine Holt, thank you for the update. Let's go to church and pray this morning.
Absolutely. Fascinating times, and praying is a very good idea.
I agree with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Bonnie Brady. Bonnie Brady, I understand you have some new updates. I know we've heard about what a fraud these windmills are because it's owned partially by one of the governments in Europe. What's the updates?
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me. Yes, you're right. Foreign government-owned energy companies that then flip it to hedge funders. Meanwhile, for years and years, we've been screaming because the federal government under the Biden administration specifically leased huge areas where commercial fishermen in the U.S. fish and bring seafood to the plates of the American people. And for years we said, if you put these cables in the water, high voltage, 345,000 volt cables all along the ocean floor, some of them not even buried, and those that are buried not by much. They're doing cheap and fast, if you get my drift. Anyway, we kept saying, you can't do this. These are important fishing grounds. They let it happen anyway. And sure enough, yesterday I got wind of, no pun intended, a new report by an Irish university about the interactions between offshore wind farms and fisheries in European waters. And it says exactly what we knew it would, that basically the Irish government and the European Union funded a report, and they covered 88 wind farms across all European waters, the UK, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, Ireland, the Netherlands, 88 offshore wind farms over a 12-year period. And they found out mobile fishing gear, guys that pull nets to catch lots of fish, any of the scallopers that bring people that love scallops, to their plate, all of those gears will be largely displaced by offshore wind. In Europe, almost 80% no longer were able to fish in the areas. And 47% not even in the wind farm, but outside of it, because it turns out that where they put these things that were really important for the fish, looks like the fish beat feet, because up to 50% of the areas outside of the wind farms, they're not there either. I mean, we've got a huge issue in the UK. They're like, oh, no, you can fish there, no worries. 3/4 of all fishing boats that pull nets that provide the best carbon footprint for any type of catching a fish, because it's a big boat able to catch big fish, bring it in, as opposed to 50,000 boats and one fish each. They also can't work in the area. And these are all fishing grounds, areas that we've all screamed about. This is
and the facts is that they did it in the name of environmental, and
Right.
and it's all a fraud.
Of course. Well, shockingly, pile driving the ocean floor with a 6,500 kilojoule hammer kills stuff. Then if you don't kill it that way, you get to jet plow the ocean floor and then juice it with hundreds of thousands of volts of electricity. I mean, of course, they're animals. We catch them and we feed the people with them. We've told them we knew about this. They ignored every single comment letter, every single hearing, even in our lawsuits. Say, oh, no, they can still fish there. Here's this study, 88 wind farms across Europe over 12 years. You can't fish there anymore. Even the static gear, which is like a gill net, which is they catch things, or potters, half of them aren't fishing there anymore. Why? Because it's an industrial zone. They've industrialized our ocean. Foreign governments have industrialized our ocean, made it unsafe for fishermen to be there from not a national security, but just a safety issue, because the helicopters can't fly low enough in order to come get you. We know it's a national security issue. Now it turns out it's destroying the oceans too. Perfect. Just what we needed. Not.
A national security issue because there's underwater drones, and the radar cannot pick them up. For instance, if those underwater drones come in for an attack on the east coast of the United States and those windmills are there, the radar can't pick them up until it's too late.
Not only that, John, but because the submarines are listening for those drones, guess what they can't hear when the fans are spinning? The vibrations from a 355-foot long blade the size of a football field spins, causes vibrations, go right down into the ocean floor at low frequencies that block the ability of some of the submarines to be able to even hear them. Plus the ones that can fly low, like we've seen in the war that's just been going on in Iran. These are all issues we know. It's not only that, it's for airplanes. Every form of radar that exists will be affected by this. It's our national defense issue, and now it turns out they're going to and the president just signed last year, the EO, Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness Act. How do you do that if you can't catch the fish?
Bonnie Brady, thank you for calling in. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Let's go to the state of Michigan, and with us today is Bill Hazienga. Bill, Congressman, car sales good.
They've been doing all right. You know, obviously a few headwinds when we're dealing with cost of living and the things that have been going on with energy especially certainly makes everything in the economy more challenging, which is frankly one of the reasons why I'm applauding the administration for their dedication to making sure that we've got American-produced energy. And we also need to make sure we've got the refineries to be able to do that. We've got to work with our allies like the Canadians to get that imported so that we're not dependent on our foreign adversaries for all this. But Straits of Hormuz has to get opened up. We can do things like give year-round E15 and some of those other things that'll grant some relief. But honestly, John, I think we need to look at a national gas tax holiday. It's 18.5 cents at the federal level. In Michigan, we're one of the highest gas tax states. It's 52.5 cents. So that'd be over 70 cents of automatic relief, and it can be temporary. But we've got to get through this, and we've got to work on with our Arab allies to make sure that straits is open and free flowing.
Well, I mean, WTI, and it's been a big controversy. WTI, which is the American crude oil, and Brent, which is European. There's no shortages in North America. And everybody's scratching their head about it. Things will sort themselves out because as soon as the strait is open and as soon as there's a peace, I guess the price will come back down to $60 a barrel.
Yeah. Secretary Bessent has talked about this. Kevin Hazlitt has talked about this. Others have made that observation. This is a world economy. The U.S. depends on basically 8% of its energy to come through the Straits of Hormuz. You look at a Japan or Korea, not to mention China, they are far more dependent than we are. We've got ample domestic production. In fact, it was during the first Trump administration that we became a net exporter of energy. What we really are lacking is refineries and pipelines and some of those things that are the infrastructure around that. So when we do that, and when the straits get sorted out, I think we will see those prices come down very dramatically. But
and at that point, once the oil comes back down and energy comes back down, gasoline comes back down, and the interest rates will come down too.
Yeah, the last Fed chair just was behind and late on the front end and late on the back end, and I don't think we're going to see that with Kevin Warsh. Once energy is solved, that's going to have ripple effects into groceries, as you well know, kind of all areas of the economy. My family's in construction. You look at costs for shingles, for siding, for plumbing, for all those things. All of that will start to moderate, and because I think the setup is with the working families tax cuts, that quote unquote one big beautiful bill. Where there's no tax on tips, no tax on overtimes, no tax on Social Security. We've set up America to come roaring back. We just need to get the Middle East sorted out here a bit, and I think that Uncle Sam is going to get unleashed here in this 250th anniversary year of us. So I think we're gonna have a very strong economy.
And you tell us what you're running for.
Yeah, well, like every member of the House of Representatives, I get a very public job review every 2 years. And so we're up again here in November. I'm the vice chairman of the Financial Services Committee, and I also serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. My district, which is in Southwest Michigan, we are very dependent on manufacturing. I'm home to a lot of Tier 1, Tier 2 automotive suppliers, office furniture like Herman Miller and it's now Miller Knoll and Hayworth. But we also have Stryker, Pfizer. I'm home to Kellogg and Post in Battle Creek, Michigan. We have a tremendous number of specialty crops, blueberries, cherries, apples, those kinds of things. And we're a tourist destination. So, we need a healthy economy.
Do you have a primary?
I do have a primary. Last time I had a primary from the right. This time I have a primary from the left. To me, it sounds like I'm doing the job the right way. I'm landing right where I need to be. But I've been a big supporter of the president and the agenda that we have. He's been supportive of me. We're just trying to go ahead and make sure that the fine people in the 4th District are being represented well.
Judge Weinberg is sitting here with us. Judge, do you have a question for the congressman?
Congressman, you sit on Foreign Affairs Committee. What's your biggest concern about the international threats to America?
Honestly, I think it is a nuclear Iran. That is, first and foremost, would have so many ripple effects in the Middle East, and as we're seeing just now with the Straits of Hormuz, the choke point that area represents in the world economy can't be underplayed. It can't be underdescribed. It's very, very significant. Secondarily to that, and maybe a very close second, is China, and where China has been going with AI and technology. I do a lot of work with the Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, out of the Commerce Department, and it's kind of interesting. I have both halves. My Financial Services Committee that does a lot on sanctions and licensing, CFIUS reviews, that kind of thing, and then our Foreign Affairs Committee does a lot of the enforcement side of that. At one point, I had to tell the last Secretary of State under Joe Biden. I said, you got a problem here because you come into the Foreign Affairs Committee and kind of, don't worry about all these sanctions, these confusing sanctions that are out there. Treasury's got it all taken care of, and it's like, well, here's the problem. I wrote some of those sanction bills, so I know what you're supposed to be doing, and you're not doing it. Sanction is only as good as your willingness to enforce them, and that's what they're doing right now. So those are the two things that really kind of keep me up.
Congressman Bill Hacianga, thank you so much for coming in today, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
John, good to be with you. Appreciate it.
The Cats Roundtable.
Calling in today, we have the Director of National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. Director Hassett, give us your pulse on what you think is going on.
I think that what's going on is that the positive momentum because of President Trump's policies is overwhelming the sort of temporary disruption of what's going on in the Persian Gulf. You don't have to believe me. You could just look at the numbers. If you add up the latest economic data to get like the aggregate gross domestic product number for the second quarter, so we're looking at about 4% growth. And to put 4% growth in perspective, remember that when President Trump came in and I was his chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in 2017, we told everybody we'd get 3% growth, which we did. And when we told people that, then Larry Summers and a whole bunch of people like that said we were crazy, that 3% was impossible. And so here we are, we've got like gas prices, which we're working on getting down and all that, but we're still looking at a 4% quarter. And that's just, I think, a metric of how successful his policies are.
Well, if we get 4% growth and if we open up the Strait of Hormuz, in the next near future, and the price of oil comes down dramatically, then there's no reason with a new Fed chair that we have that the interest rates come down, and then we'll have the best economic year we ever had.
Yeah, we're already, looking like that's possible, even if the straits sort of continue to slog through. But there's just so much growth going out there. So if they open the straits, the boats move about 300 nautical miles per day. And so if you look at the places where energy prices are really, really high, that's driving global prices up, it's like India, Pakistan, Singapore. Those places are actually pretty close to the Gulf. And their refineries are more or less turned down to almost nothing because they have no more oil. And that's why, jet fuel, diesel fuel, gasoline prices are through the roof. They're going to get oil within a few days once the straits are open. And I think that people really underestimate how fast energy prices can go down.
I know the president keeps telling us a multi-trillion dollars in new investment. What is the timetable on that? How much of that $18 trillion he's talking about will be this year versus next year versus the year after?
Oh, well, it's a great question, and it's something that we track really, really carefully. In fact, my office keeps a spreadsheet of the commitments, and so, like, when we say these numbers, they're actually true, and we have a schedule of groundbreakings for all of these projects, and a lot of them have already broken ground. Some of them are breaking ground between now and the end of the year. I would say that the vast majority of the projects will have broken ground by December. And you're already seeing it show up in the numbers. So the capital spending number for March that just came out a few weeks ago was the biggest increase in like the purchases of new machines and equipment and stuff like that we had just about ever seen. And so what's happening is they first got to build a building, and then they put the machines in, then they hire the workers. And so we've made so much progress getting the building built already that they're buying the machines now. So it's really
not only that. Then we got our Small Business Administration come around. If they build a $1 billion building, you need small businesses to service around and all the employees of that new $1 billion building.
Yeah, exactly. And small business sentiment is doing really, really well. And the small business story I find most interesting when I'm looking at the data is that there's two types of small businesses in the U.S. Small businesses, regardless of what they're doing. It could be a hairdresser, or a soda pop shop. that they're managing inventory and managing employees and things like that. If they hire an artificial intelligence, an AI consultant, then the firms that did in the last year saw their sales double. Can you imagine? And the firms that didn't saw their sales stagnate. And so if there are small businessmen out there listed, like, you should just like Google and find somebody to help you use AI to make your business a little bit better, because it's really, really working.
I would say the number one priority is that we continue with in November. The November election has to go. All the houses have to go Republican, and the sun will shine for the rest of the century.
It's really true that the president's done so much good, and that the election is super important. The thing that gives me, great hope is just that he's out there endorsing people left and right. It seems like everybody endorses wins. So I'm very optimistic about the fall.
Well, Director of National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, thank you so much for everything you do, and thank you for coming on. We'll catch up again real soon.
Thanks. It's a great honor to be here with you.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Let's get an update from Dr. Peter Mielos. We all want to live longer and we all want to live healthier. Dr. Peter, what's going on there this morning?
Well, today, John, we're going to talk about a topic that is affecting people globally, and it has been affecting people for many, many years, and that's viruses and the spread of viruses. And one of the reasons that we're seeing the spread of viruses around the world is because of population mobility and global trade and cargo ships and planes. And we're seeing an increased number of these various viral cases. One is called dengue fever, another one's called chikungunya, Zika, and there's a mosquito called the Aedes mosquito, and it's killed basically millions of people, just like when they were doing the Panama Canal. A lot of people don't realize that most of the people ended up dying from mosquito-borne diseases like malaria. But a fascinating story is one of the most aggressive mosquitoes is called the Asian tiger mosquito. And it's a fascinating story at how it ended up in the United States and Europe. The Asian tiger mosquitoes were transported in used tigers from Asia down to Texas. And what happens is that the larva lives inside the water that accumulates in these used tires, and it dries up. And then once it gets moisture again and it goes to a moist environment, it released all these Asian tiger mosquitoes, and it created outbreaks down in Texas and places like Georgia. And then it's interesting that some of those used tires that were sent from Georgia, where there are now large numbers of mosquitoes, they were shipped to Italy, and then an outbreak happened in Croatia, Spain, southern France, and Italy. So that's a fascinating story about the mobility of some of these diseases. But right now, the one that's in the news a lot that concerns us is the Ebola virus. And again, these are all RNA viruses. What happens is that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have this new strain of Ebola called the Bundibugyo strain. And it's been around since 2007. There's 220 deaths so far there, and there's over 2,000 cases. And in Uganda, they also had 7 cases, including 2 healthcare workers. Thank God we don't have any cases in the USA, but that's why the CDC now, any flights coming in from the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, or Uganda, they have to actually fly through Washington, through the Dulles Airport, because they have to be screened by the CDC. And the good news is Ebola is not airborne. It happens with direct contact with blood, saliva, and bodily fluids. But the other good news is that the great company of George Yancopoulos and Roy Vagelos, Regeneron, made IV antibodies to fight Ebola. And last year they did donate them to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And whatever new strains there are, they have the ability to make new IV antibodies. So we need to push for more IV antibodies and also more RNA antivirals like they have in some other countries that we don't have here yet, like Avigan, Favipiravir, that block RNA viruses, just like they blocked during COVID. We didn't have them here in the United States, but other countries did have them, and that was very helpful. So, a lot of people just keep pushing vaccines, which are very important, of course, for many diseases. But when it comes to these RNA viruses, the the variants occur and they keep changing. And as you and I talked about, these viruses have intelligence. They have viral intelligence. When they see an infected cell, they actually know to bypass it and they move on to another cell. So we need to be as healthy as possible. And as we've talked about, keeping our immune system maximized, keeping our vitamin D levels between 50 and 75. Those people, for example, didn't end up in the ICU as much with COVID. Now we're learning how important it is to try to stay healthy. And, if you are feeling sick or not well, they have these tests now where you can have flu A, flu B, and COVID all in one test when you travel. I always travel with one of those. If you have flu, you have access to Tamiflu, osteomalvir, which was great. And there are antivirals like molnupiravir and Paxlovid for COVID, and hopefully they'll start allowing some of these other RNA blocking pills for all these other different viruses that seem to be on the rise. So in the summer around your house, avoid pools of water, especially with small children. There are things that you can put on the skin on babies, for example, with eucalyptus and other natural substances so that the mosquitoes don't come around, because mosquitoes and tick-borne illnesses are a real thing, and we have to try to avoid them and always check, especially children, to make sure they don't have any ticks on them, and try to keep them away from areas where you see mosquitoes.
By the way, the latest thing we worry about is every time I eat strawberries, I sneeze. So I'm stopping to eat strawberries. Is it happening to any other people?
Well, some people do react to strawberries, and we do develop allergies sometimes later in life. So, our bodies are sometimes our best doctor. If you're reacting, you need to avoid it. And, certain things that contain strawberries, we have to avoid it. But also sometimes it could be the pesticides that they spray onto these things. And sometimes they put some of these wax coatings to prolong the life of certain vegetables. That's why sometimes organic fruits don't look as appealing, but one of the reasons is because they're not sealed in with these other chemicals and artificial things. I tend to try to eat things without the skin, and I really don't eat strawberries. I think blueberries and kiwis are probably one of the healthier choices, and nothing like some good watermelon in the summer.
Thank you so much, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Thanks for always getting the truth out on the Cats Roundtable.
The Cats Roundtable.
We always have Lynn Shaw, Lynn's Warriors, helping our kids and grandkids. Well, Lynn, what do you have in mind this week?
Well, good morning, John. I'm going to start with asking you a question. What is happening on June 11th, 2026? This is the kickoff to the 2026 FIFA, the World Cup, happening here across America, and millions of people are looking forward to celebrating all of this. We're going to have increased tourism. There's a lot of international excitement. But there's another reality, John, happening beneath the surface that the public must understand right now. And this is happening, the World Cup. We've got, we've got 16 cities in America hosting it, the biggest in history with 48 teams. And it begins in Mexico on June 11th, ending up right here in our own backyard, the MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey in July. But I am here to sound the alarm. Major sporting events, concerts, conventions, wherever you have a lot of people gathering, okay, are magnets for fans, but they're also magnets for traffickers and predators. Whenever you have massive crowds descending in one area on cities, vulnerable kids, runaway teens, struggling young adults, and exploited people, individuals become targets behind the chaos because there's so much chaos going on, nobody's paying attention. So temporary workers flood cities. Hotels become overwhelmed. Law enforcement stretched thin already. We know all this. And criminal networks love all of this, and they move right in and exploit all of these conditions. Well, we at the Warriors have been working almost 3 years now directly with law enforcement, with many other groups and organizations. John, we're getting ready for this World Cup. Everybody should understand, human trafficking is not something happening in these faraway places. We are always thinking Philippines and Thailand and far, far away. It's happening here. You have to follow the money, the crowds, and it operates anonymously. And large-scale events, again, when everybody's, it's chaotic and everybody's rushing about, create the perfect cover. But the good news is the awareness. We're talking about it today. Coordination, law enforcement, vigilance. Banks are on board now, hotels. We've got rideshare apps, Uber, Lyft. Stadium workers have been informed and trained. Law enforcement is doing an excellent job so far. Nonprofits and ordinary citizens must help us also identify warning signs before we have victims disappearing deeper into exploitation. So I'm here to say the public needs to understand this is not paranoia, but this is preparation. And the other thing everybody has to understand, what do you do if you see something? First of all, there's going to be plenty of law enforcement on the ground. You go up to somebody right away and report it. You don't get in trouble if you're wrong. You report, okay? Banks are really stepping up and joining in on all this financial goings-on, right? Because they're using Venmo and they're using PayPal and they're using Zelle. All these things we know about, we use in our everyday lives. They're using it, so the banks are on call. But we have, again, been coordinating for almost 3 years, and that is why this is so important. We've got bartenders trained around the country. Everybody's in on this. And we want the public, though, to look at home, monitor their kids, as much as they can, discuss this is happening, right, across America. Lots of people are going. They're telling me every day they're going to these soccer matches across America. Know who your kids are communicating with. Teach them about, these events lead to trafficking and exploitation. And you know what? Because the traffickers always seem, John, to be 10 steps ahead of law enforcement and all of us. You know what? Prepare, prepare, prepare. So report the suspicious activity, again, to somebody boots on the ground. If that all fails, you call 911 immediately. Pay attention. We are begging everybody, if you see something, to say something. We've got the human trafficking hotline, 888-373-7888. And be on the lookout if you see kids, in the ladies' room or the men's room, with an adult and it seems suspicious. All of this, John, comes into play. Watch the bathroom.
I've talked to all. I've talked to all.
They want to go to the bathroom. They want to go get a snack. Don't let them alone at these large stadiums. Be on alert. That's 100%. The number one thing. Be on alert.
Len, I have told us all our politicians, the right way to say it is to make sure that 80% of the people you're saying it to feel the same way. 80% of the people feel the same way. There should only be men's and boys' men's and women's bathrooms. They cannot be. You cannot allow women or men to be in the women's bathrooms. That's 80% of the people feel that way, maybe more. And things like that.
I think it's more. I think it's more than that. Like the people I know. I think it's probably 95% if the truth be known. I'm not kidding. I think it's high, John.
The same thing with, would you want your a man playing in the girls' soccer games? And I say 80%, 90%, that's correct too. So we should carry that out and should be, whether it's for our daughters or whether for our granddaughters, it should be the same thing. People have to watch out for that. And thank you for pointing it out. And we carry the bugle together. And people that want to visit your website, it's linswarriors.org.
That's it, John.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much for coming on and expounding that, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thanks, John. We'll talk again soon.
The Cats Roundtable.
If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. Every Sunday morning, we'll bring you the latest in what's happening in our community, our country, and the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a nice Sunday.